going to just make a few prints from my gelatin plate that I need. I don't use much in the way of pink, and so I decided that today I would make a few pink pages because I'm wanting to do collage, and I find myself quite limited. I make bright colours and yellows and greens and blues and bright deep pinks and reds and other colours, but I don't have any of the more pastel-y pinks, and so that's what my aim is for today. For once in my life I have got an aim. So I've just pulled out the very limited amount of different acrylic paints that I have in my stash that are sort of pinkish. Plus I've got a heap of these cheap Montmartre little acrylic tubes that simply dry up if you don't use them, and so I thought, well, some of the whites and things I might be able to use. I've pulled out a few stencils, and again I don't know how much of this I'll be using. A couple of spongy bits for dabbing, and also including a Ranger dabber, and I've got a bit of bubble wrap, some orange bag mesh, plastic mesh. There's a lovely piece of punchinella that Mags from New Zealand sent me ages ago. It's the only piece I've ever been able to find of that. And as I say, a few stencils, including some of the homemade ones, a couple of larger ones there. So I'm just putting those aside because I really don't need those just yet. I might use some of these in the later stages of the process. Beside me down here on the little table I've got a roll-off sort of old cartridge paper sketchbook, cartridge paper book that's just got a few leaves left in it, and I'm using that to roll off any leftover paint. And that's just down here beside me. I've got my roller, I've got my little piece of craft mat that's been adhered to a piece of cardboard that's beside me for spreading the paint. I've got my water. I even remembered my damp towels because I mustn't make a mess in here. And I'm using, it's just copy paper, but it's 120 GSM and it's smooth white. I find this gives me a good result when I'm adding layers and wanting to scan it for later usage, which is what I now do with most of my gelatin prints. I use them from a printed version rather than the original, because that allows me to reuse. So I've got a stack of that, and I've got my revamped gelatin plate. Now make sure I'm in frame, I tend to want to wander off. This is how I store it. It's just a cheap $2 box from the reject shop, and I store the gelatin plate upside down, the box upside down. I store the gelatin plate in the lid, and here you can see I've got it on a piece of acetate for ease of movement. I'll just remove it from the box lid and it's pretty good to go. Now this, sorry about the glare, we seem to not be able to do a lot about that with my current lighting setup. I had to remelt my original gelatin plate because I'd set it in an old plastic cake box which looked perfectly fine and it was more square, but during its lifetime someone had actually must have cut a cake inside the box, and even though it was barely visible to the naked eye, take a gelatin print, and that line was right across the middle of the gelatin print. So I got sick of fiddling with that, so I melted it down and used an old cake pan which had no straight sides to reset it, and this time I've got a lovely flat surface. So if you're having trouble with your gelatin plates, then it's well worth breaking them up, melting them down very, very gently and resetting them. As you can see, this one is nice and thick. It's a good inch thick, so it's got plenty of sponginess and plenty of weight. didn't clean it very well last time. It's still got a bit of last time's play time on it, but that'll come off. As you can see, it is not quite as big as an A4, but I'll sit it on top. You might be able to see it better, mightn't you? Actually, that the acetate sheet it's sitting on is actually A4, so it fits within that boundary. What I'm going to do is just take a few prints, mainly fairly washy. I saw this technique somewhere ages ago where instead of piling on the acrylic paint and getting rich, bright colours, if you use a little bit of paint and a lot of water and make washes and just layer them up, you get a nice translucent soft colour that's absolutely perfect for collaging onto, or then applying other processes to the over the top of it. And that's really what I want to do today. I just want to add a bit of colour, take some prints, let it dry, add some more colour. So what I'll do is I'll stop talking and I will just make a few prints. I'll stop the video while they dry. I'll come back and add some more layers, and then we'll see what we get. But I thought you might like to just see how I go about it, so hence the video is on. I've really gotten out of the way of making videos in the last few months, so it's good to remind myself to get in and actually turn the video on when I'm playing. Because sometimes it's interesting, and even if I just keep it as a record for myself, it's useful for that purpose too. Okay, here we go. I'll get started. Well, here we are. It's a few hours later. These have been drying, and I just thought I'd quickly show you what I've got so far. I'll leave all these to dry overnight, even though they feel pretty dry now. I don't like to put them onto my scanner bed until I'm absolutely sure there's no little, especially with the more textured ones with the lumpy bits of paint, the ones through the stencil. I don't like to make marks on the scanner glass, so I'll just leave them. Now this one is, I don't know if you can see the texture, this was the canvas, the gessoed canvas paper, canvas page, that had a little bit of silver in it, and the silver, you won't see that, it's night time and it's quite dull. It's got a lovely little bit of gleam in there, and that will be fabulous for something in a journal or for a couple of card backgrounds, whatever. But before I take it there, I'll definitely be scanning all of these, because it's amazing how much you can enhance them and print them off and use them in other ways. I really like the originals because they've got the texture, and you can feel the paint, you can feel the texture, you can see it. But I also like the manipulation that's possible once you've got them digitally entered into your database. So that's the canvas page, and I was pleased how that went. I'll just leave these on the workbench. Now that was just the roll-off page, and even that has got potential and is quite neat, and either as a collage background or a card background, I can see lots of uses for that, even though it's just the rubbishy roll-offs from my brayer. So I was pleased with that one too. I'm pleased with all of them actually. This one, I like the texture that's on the, it's almost dendritic, the texture of the purple bits, and that's really nice. And this was one that I took up the negative spaces from the white and silver piece, and so there's actually more silver on this than there was on that canvas one, or it's more visible. You'll probably catch the gleam as I roll it. So that's really, I'm happy with that. I'm loving that. That's going to be great for a collage. Might be nice for a card. And certainly, even if you don't use them for cards, all of these are wonderful. I love this. The originals to use for envelopes for cards, so these will be used maybe for that. This little one has got a finer mesh from the Punchinella, and also a little bit of silver, just rub off where it was. So it's got some interest, it's got some texture, and it's quite nice and pale, so that one's great. This one is quite, well, it's interesting. This one will enhance up beautifully and would make a good background for adding some stamping or other bits too. So I'm pleased with that one. This one again has got that dendritic through the stencil look, bits of silver in amongst it, glinting there just lightly, nothing too over the top. And again, of course, it's got that lovely Punchinella. Every time I see that, I think of Mags in New Zealand and how kind she was to send it to me, because I've never seen it here. Now this one is probably the dullest. Again, it's got a bit of silver gleam in it, and it's probably more sort of greyish than any of the others. But that one is going to enhance up just beautifully when I put it into Photoshop and play with the contrast and the definition. That one, the purples will really come to life in that, and the deeper pinks in the background. So I'm looking forward to seeing how this one pans out. And the last one is this fairly plain one, but because I used it after I had taken off that the canvas page, it's got a wonderful texture of the sort of canvas texture on it. And so I really like that too. So all in all, I'm totally happy with today's little exercise. I have produced some pinky pieces, which is pretty foreign for me to have pinky pieces in my stash, and I'm really looking forward to playing with some of these. Absolutely. So once these are perfectly dry overnight, I will get them scanned in, and I'll come back probably in another video and show you things that I've made from these pages, because I find it really hard to make things that I'm not going to use. I don't like just making pages because I'm playing with jelly print. I like them to have purpose. And so I'll get back to you just when I work out what that purpose is. I already know for a couple of them, but the rest we'll see. Okay, thanks so much for watching, and I'll talk to you really soon. Bye for now.